I am Tony O'Neill, and welcome to the Outdoor Industry Executive Voices podcast. Today, I am absolutely thrilled to bring you a conversation with a titan from the specialty retail running world, Mr. Chuck Abood. Chuck has pioneered the revolutionary 3D scanning technology. He scaled operations from just one store to an astonishing 46 stores. And Chuck isn't just about big numbers, he's a culture builder. He's an exceptional communicator and an operational thought leader. So today, we're going to dive deep into his strategies, into his vision, and the story behind scaling Roadrunner Sports and becoming a category growth leader. So without further ado, let's dive in. Chuck, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Tony. Absolutely great to be here. Thanks for the time.
I'm so glad we get to do this together today. Chuck, so I'd like to start out, and I'd like the listeners to know, can you tell us a little bit about your entry point into the outdoor industry and your outdoor career?
Yeah, sure. Gosh, that goes back many years, Tony. I'll tell you, I grew up in the Boston area, about 50 miles north of Boston in Manchester, New Hampshire. So southern part of New Hampshire. In that area, I'm not sure where you are, but Boston sports fans, pretty rabid. And so I grew up, a lot of sports talk at home, a lot of sports talk at school, playing sports, whether it be baseball, football, pond hockey, basketball, whatever the case may be. So sports has always been part of my life, including outdoors, hunting and fishing. In high school, I had an opportunity to work. My first job in the area was at a pro shop at a hockey arena. And I would sell hockey equipment, sharpen hockey skates, and oversee that as a manager on duty, overseeing that shop as well as the concession area. So first foray, way back in high school, did that through college.
Interesting. So then were you also a hockey player, or was this your first job that you were working?
Yeah, it wasn't my first job I was working. Actually grew up working for my dad, started about 11 years old chopping firewood, and did that for several years. But no, I did not play any organized hockey, more out with the guys on the pond or street hockey, things like that.
So I grew up playing hockey. And so when I think about the role that you had in the shop, you were the one who I had to entrust with my skates, right? And the skates were sharpened right. You know, I felt like, my performance was better. And so I was almost a fanatic about having my skates sharpened. How did your journey then from your first job working in a pro shop in a hockey arena, and then tell us a little bit into your segue into how you got into specialty retail in the running world?
Yeah. Well, graduating from college, I said, okay, got to go out and got to find that career opportunity. The first job I landed out of college was selling health and life insurance to senior citizens. So here I was, fresh out of college, 22 years old, and our prime products were a Medicare supplement and a nursing home care policy. And so in doing that, I'll tell you, I learned a ton. I learned a ton about selling. I learned a lot about resilience. Certainly cold calling is not for the faint of heart. But really what I ended up realizing was this just wasn't lighting a fire for me. And so after doing that for a period, a couple guys that I knew from college, they said, hey, we're going to go out to San Diego. You ought to come with us. And I thought about it. I said, I'm young. Now's the time. If I'm going to do something like this, let's go check it out. So we packed it up. We moved out to San Diego. I absolutely fell in love with it. And I landed my first job out here was right back in the sporting goods. It was with a chain called Cal Stores at the time. It had 10 stores here in Southern California. And the guys that I moved out with, they left after about 3 months. I was enjoying what I was doing, enjoying the California lifestyle, and I said, I'm sticking it out. I'd always told my family, I'm going to move back. I'll come back and see you. And I did that for about 6 months. And I thought, Southern California's calling me. So after a little bit of heartache with the family, I said, I'm going to move back. And they understood. When I came back to San Diego, some friends of mine from Cal Stores were working at Roadrunner Sports, and they were hiring for phone salespeople. Roadrunner Sports was a catalog company, only distributed catalogs basically at the time, and people would call in to order their shoes. And my job was to make sure that we secured that order and to tell customers about other things that would make their running more enjoyable. And that, Tony, turned into a 28-year career with Roadrunner Sports.
Okay, so moving from New Hampshire to San Diego, you move out there with some friends. They pull the plug. They go back to New Hampshire. Why didn't they make it, and why did you fall in love with it?
I think I was committed at the time. I was a year out of college. I was saying, hey, I got to get my career going. These guys came out, I think they almost looked at it as maybe a little bit of a break after college. They didn't land a job right away. They just felt like, yeah, I think I'd be happier being back in the Northeast. And for me, it was time to get rocking and rolling. Landing at Roadrunner, I mean, you start somewhere like that. And I said, well, I'll do this for a little while, taking phone calls until I find my next opportunity in retail management. And over 28 years, just people say, how do you stay at one company for 28 years? Well, I wasn't obviously just doing the same thing over that period of time. I had an opportunity. I counted recently. I had 9 different roles over those 28 years. And so it definitely kept me engaged. It kept me enthused and learning a lot about a lot of different areas of the business. Started out working the call center. I had 3-4 roles there. I was eventually running the sales department, over 100 people. Then the store at the San Diego side of the business. We had 1 store at the time. And they asked me if hey, in addition to running the sales department, that store's growing and we need some strong leadership over there. Would you take that on as well? I had built my team in the call center and felt like, yeah, I can take this on as well. That was the first foray back into brick and mortar retail for me. As time was going on, we decided to open stores. They said, okay, just focus on the San Diego store and go out and open another store. So that's where I really then shifted over working on the stores. Over time, they said, hey, can you take that call center back? Then from there, it came to, hey, how about the website? Can you bring the leadership and the organization you brought to the stores and the call center over to the website? And then eventually went on to marketing. And that's kind of where I ended up in the chief revenue and chief operating role at Roadrunner Sports.
Let me recap just a minute.
Please.
So your first role out of college before you moved to San Diego was selling insurance, which historically people know that is a very challenging business. It is a cold calling business. And you talked initially about resilience, and cold calling takes a tremendous amount of resilience. I actually, this morning, coincidentally, I wrote a post on LinkedIn about resilience and my foray into cold calling when I first started, coincidentally, with a Boston-based company that was monster.com. So knowing and understanding your background of starting out in the insurance business and knocking on doors, then you move to San Diego and you get back into, where your very first job, retail sporting goods. And now this opportunity starts opening, essentially wide up for it. You're one of the very, you had one store at the time?
At Roadrunner, 1 store, yeah. Attached to the front of a warehouse.
God.
And
attached to the front of a warehouse. And how long was there just 1 store for before the growth, before the vision for the growth began?
Yeah, the company started in 1983. The vision for opening additional stores was there for a few years, but the owner of Roadrunner Sports and the founder, he just never saw himself going into brick and mortar retail. He said, I just don't understand that side of the business.
Okay.
I am a direct marketing guy. That's what I know. I just don't want to go down this path. Mm-hmm. And it really wasn't until 2002, 2003, where we had presented some information to a consultant that we worked with and said, hey, this is what we presented. We think we have a wonderful opportunity. This 1 store we have is doing well. We can do this across the country. And he had some magic words. Whatever he said worked, because we finally convinced the owner of Roadrunner Sports to go ahead and try opening another store. And so that's what we did. I looked up in Chicago, Seattle, and the San Francisco Bay Area. Those were 3 markets where we already knew we had customers. That was the beauty, by the way, of having a direct marketing company, is you've got names and addresses of people, where they are, where your current customers are coming from. We said, let's go far enough away where this test is valid. We didn't want to just do another store in San Diego. And so it was September of 2004, that we opened our store in Seattle.
Okay. So in 2004, so then Seattle was the second store that you opened, and you had customers there, right? You had customers in Chicago, you had customers in the Bay Area. Was there any other types of consumer, I guess nowadays are called consumer insights, I'm sure probably 2004, the big CPG companies were, obviously they had been doing this for years. But with knowing that, was there any component based on where people run the most? And I am curious, where do people run the most in the United States?
Yeah, great question. There are surveys that show that, what are the most active cities and things like that. For us, one of the things that really stood out about this location in Seattle was that it was right next to Green Lake Park. And that was the busiest park in the entire state of Washington. So with the trail going right around there, it just made a ton of sense for us to be in that area. The next one was up in Anaheim, California, so a little closer to home. We knew that we had a strong base in Los Angeles. We wanted to play with the model a little bit. We wanted something that was freeway visible, maybe a little bit more warehousey like the original store was. And, that store, we ended up moving it based on some of the geography and customers' ability to get there. And then we also opened a clearance store right next to our San Diego store. And then from there, we opened up a store up in the San Francisco Bay Area. So still kind of looking at where we had strong concentrations of customers and getting our first step into those markets. Then from there, it was just a matter of continuing to pinpoint where are the markets where we have customers. We had insights that a lot of typical retailers at that time didn't have because we came up through the direct marketing world. Capturing customer information was really important to us, even at the store level. So a customer would come in, we'd still get their name and address because we were a direct marketing company. We'll still sell ourselves as a direct marketing company. So when we were going to market out to our customers, we were going to send them catalogs and other mailers to get them to come to the stores. And so those types of insights really didn't start hitting other retailers till a few years after that.
Do you remember before you opened up the second, third, and fourth store, how many employees did Roadrunner have at the time?
Oh, gosh. I would say we were 150-ish, maybe, at the time. After, we had a large, with the call center.
Okay.
We had the warehouse. So 150, 200, somewhere in that range.
Who from the organization was involved in the scouting and the actual implementation of the very first store? Because you hadn't done this in the past, and you guys were focused on direct marketing. So who in the organization led the tip of the spear into the retail? It was you.
And look, I told them, hey, I've never opened a store before. I have prior retail experience, and I said I'm going to need some help. And so I actually was able to get out and talk to a consultant in the area that knew about finding locations in real estate. He helped me put together some of the criteria that we should be looking for. And then as I went out and talked to the brokers, I learned a ton from them in terms of, what we should be looking for in terms of the location layout, ingress, egress, and a lot of those other things that you learn over time. I opened for Roadrunner the first 4 or 5 stores on my own. And then at that point, Roadrunner said, hey, we really want to do a lot of expansion here. And so the CEO of Roadrunner, he knew somebody who worked in retail. And this gentleman had worked at Gap. He had founded Baby Gap. He ran all the Disney stores in North America. Brought him in to really then kind of head up the real estate side. He really focused on the real estate, and I was focused on the people and the operations and things like that. And that was just a great learning experience. He's a great mentor, a gentleman named Bob Bell. And I learned a lot about him and a lot from him, in terms of what are the things you do? How do you work with these real estate agents and whatnot? So he helped us get from those first few stores to around 20. And that was just a tremendous learning experience for me.
That's so interesting. So Bob comes in after store number 5. Tell me this. I'm really interested to know, you went and pioneered something in yourself. You basically went and learned how to find a store, work with the brokers, choose a location, all these different pieces of criteria. You've never done this before, and now you're doing it for the first 5 stores. What was the most surprising thing that you learned when Bob came in after you had already done 5 stores?
For me, it was understanding a little bit more about, I do appreciate, the real estate guys. They have your best interests at heart. At the same time, they are trying to do a deal. And so the first couple deals I did were structured a little differently. And, we early on, we weren't necessarily looking for TI money, and that's tenant improvement allowances. Okay. So as we moved along, I learned a lot about how do you negotiate on the lease and how do you maximize the benefit for the company, cash flow out front, long-term investment on the lease, things like that.
And what is, I'm not familiar with the term TI money. What
Yeah,
is
thanks.
that?
It's a tenant allowance. It's basically where the landlord is giving you money up front to help you with the build out of your location. So a lot of retailers, when you go in, you don't want to have a full cash outlay in front of you. So, it costs you a few $100,000 to build out a store. The landlord's going to give you money toward that so long as you stay for the term of the lease.
This next part of the journey begins for you. What are some of the things that you learned along the way as you were scaling the business from the inside? Bob was on the outside looking for retail locations. Internally, you were all trying to make decisions on what's going to be best for the business, what's going to serve the customer the best. But now you need this infrastructure to continue to support them. Can you tell us a little bit about what that entailed and what that journey was like from your end?
It's a matter, Tony, of knowing what help do I need and when do I need it in particular areas. And, I think one of the first key areas was on the merchandising side and really managing the product flow to the stores as well as the visual merchandising. Making sure that those things are lined up is critical. And I can't put enough emphasis on during the hiring process, making sure that you find people that are a culture fit. Because Roadrunner, was definitely prided on a strong belief from the team in the company about what we were doing. There was a strong affinity within Roadrunner Sports to the active lifestyle and making sure that we bring that to all of the locations across the country. We knew that was going to be a challenge. And so for me, I was the first multi-store leader, and it was important that I bring that out to the field. And then being able to inculcate that within a store and then hiring from within to develop up multi-store leaders was an important strategy for us. So you had a store manager who was clearly showing that they understood what we were doing, they understood why we were doing it, and being able to then take that to multi-store leadership and teach that, it was just critical to the growth.
When you were out building the teams for these stores from the inside and then hiring the individuals who were going to run them and staff them, what were some of the key cultural fits that you were looking for? And when I say cultural fit, did this mean that you were looking for people who were specifically, they were runners themselves, or did they come from the Foot Lockers and the Finish Lines of the world? What cultural pieces were most important to Roadrunner at that time that you saw this is going to help us drive the right customer experience and have the right cultural internally, is because you were leading these teams?
Tony, early on, we were looking for runners. We were looking for people that were very much into running, had been doing it for some period of time, because we thought that was very important to be able to relate to our customer. If you make that the most important thing you look for, sometimes you can leave out folks who you don't realize could actually be a better culture fit for you. So that evolved over time. And to Roadrunner, it really, trust me, we had a lot of great runners over the years, and Roadrunner still has a lot of great runners. But it became people who were looking to espouse a healthy, active lifestyle. And that was important to them. The other thing we had to be careful of is when you have a lot of really intense runners in the store, sometimes, especially in a running store, specialty store, that can become a little intimidating to the general public. I don't know if I can go there. I don't know that I fit in. I feel a little intimidated by these people. Oh my gosh, look at the muscles rippling in that guy's legs. I don't look like that. So really, I would just say we had to open up our minds. And what we actually found is that people from the restaurant service industry who had that mindset worked out to be incredible employees at Roadrunner Sports, because they had that understanding that I'm doing this one-on-one service with this customer, and they were working for tips in the stores. Well, we don't work for tips at the Roadrunner store, but there was definitely suggestive selling and things like that, and having that mindset that I'm here to serve you and to help you along your way was really important.
That's so interesting that the service industry or hospitality and restaurants, which makes sense, right? these individuals, they're there to cater and to, enhance the experience by whether it's suggestive selling or, really just trying to get person, whether it's, they're in a restaurant trying to, here's the right dish that fits your taste, or in a running store, which is really important. Here is how we're going to make sure that you have the right footwear then to, whether you're running 5K or you're running, 12 miles on a Saturday.
The other thing I was thinking about, where you mentioned, hey, what are the things that you look for operationally within a store? Well, the important things, certainly hiring was a very important aspect. But the other thing that we really wanted to do was to make sure that our experience was differentiated and unique. Specialty, that's where it's at. You've got to have a unique experience where your customers are saying, I need to go to that location because they're going to help me with, what I'm doing. And so one of the things early on that I wanted to do was have a unique fitting experience in our stores. And we had treadmills in our stores where customers would try on their shoes. But I had a visit up to Nike's campus that really changed my mindset about what things could be in our stores. Going up there, as you can imagine, their running lab is just amazing. The technology that they have where they put a device inside the person's shoe between their foot and the shoe. And as a person runs, it would show dynamically what their foot did as it rolled from the heel toward the toe off. There was a plate that they'd run across and it would measure how much pressure you put down. They had slow motion video capture cameras to see what the person's legs and feet were actually doing. And it was just remarkable. And I said, well, I can't do all of that. But what can I do? And I'd seen some running stores out there have cameras in there, but they never used them. And I thought, what an opportunity they're missing out on, because the first time I saw it, I went, wow, I've never seen anybody running like that and slowed down like that. What an education experience that is for the customer. And we couldn't have all the things that you put inside the shoe, but we actually found a mat that a customer could stand on or walk across that would mimic the same thing. And it actually showed you, oh, here's how your foot moves as you go from heel to toe off. And so we put this in the store and, we didn't know necessarily what it was going to do. And the next thing you know, people are looking, going, I want to do that. I want to do that. And we got lines going in the store. And we're, the owner of our company is hearing from his friends, this thing that you're doing in your stores is absolutely amazing. Now take that experience and you say, okay, now we've got to make sure that we train on this properly. We're going to blow this thing up. We're going to make it front and center in our stores. And we're going to really make this the cornerstone of what we do. We created a form for people to follow. Tony, getting people to follow the process consistently every time, it was such a challenge because people would either do the first part and then they jump down to the third and then the fourth and then back to the second. And no, just follow it this way. This is the way it goes. We ended up saying, okay, we need to put a touch screen program in place that you have to literally go to this screen, to this screen, to this screen in order to get the consistency that we needed. When we did that, that took it to another level. Really, really exciting. And then from there, it was a matter of saying, okay, how can I bring this experience now to a different spot? And again, I'm going to tell you a little bit about a visit I had to one of our vendors, and this time it was Superfeet. We were selling a lot of Superfeet insoles in our stores, still a great product. And when I'd gone up to visit with them, they were telling me that they were in ski shops. And when they were there, they actually custom molded a Superfeet to the person's foot. And they'd sit up on this throne and they would vacuum mold the Superfeet with a little piece of cork to the person's foot, and it was customized to fit a Superfeet to that person's foot. And they said, hey, but nobody in running really wants to do this. And I said, I do. Let's try this. So we actually brought the throne into Roadrunner Sports and we tried it out. We sold a few, but getting people to sit up on the throne and go through that process was a challenge. But it did get us thinking about, where could we go? Is there another opportunity for a custom insole to put in the shoe for the customer? And that's where we found Foot Balance, a company out of Finland. And we started working with them. We started iterating with them. And with that product, it was something that was actually a piece of plastic in the insole that you would heat mold in a little oven. And then you'd have the customer stand on these pillows that would put the person's foot in the proper neutral position. And you would mold the insoles to the person's foot. And this was revolutionary at the time. The challenge there was getting people to want to mold the insole during that process, because you'd get to the end of a 10 or 15 minute analysis and the customer was just blown away. I've never seen myself run before. I've never learned so much about the way. I understand exactly what type of shoe. Let's go get my shoe. And we'd say, well, yeah, but we want you to mold these insoles. And they'd say, no, I don't want that. I don't need that. Let's just go get my shoe. Once we figured out how to fit that molding process into that entire experience, that's when things really took off with a custom insole. So that definitely changed and helped put Roadrunner on the map in the specialty world, and really helped to grow revenues substantially. We made this a cornerstone of the WOW experience at Roadrunner Sports. And so, no, we always wanted to stay ahead.
I'd be super interested to get your thoughts on, in the specialty retail of running specifically, what transitional shifts do you foresee the future going to look like in this type of specialty retailer for footwear?
I think that for Roadrunner, they are a running company and they've built their bones around that. They've expanded the thought process. Clearly now, a lot more folks walking than running. That of evolution has occurred and will continue to happen. Roadrunner does a great job of servicing runners and walkers. In addition, there are people that are cross-training. So Roadrunner has moved into that arena. I think a next step for them could be taking this fit experience and making sure that they have something solid around fitting customers who are getting cross-training shoes. From there, the other thing that's happened at Roadrunner is people who just need a comfortable fitting pair of shoes, need help with some additional arch support. Doctors in the area know what Roadrunner is able to provide. So it's gone from helping runners and walkers and active people. You'd be amazed, Tony, at the number of folks who show up who come with a cane or a walker, and their doctor has told them, you've got to go to Roadrunner Sports to get proper fitting shoes. And so that's been a remarkable shift where now it's just people looking for comfort. Please help me relieve myself of this pain. And Roadrunner's been a great spot for that. And I think you'll see that in specialty run across the country.
Which makes sense, as over the last 3 years, we've all become, or 3 or 4 years now, we've all become much more conscious on our overall health. That's a good segue into can you tell us what it was like to run this many specialty retail stores that were focused on a healthy activity, healthy living, and then the pandemic happened. How did you manage through that with so many stores and so many employees?
It was a very challenging time, I'll tell you. As you can imagine, March 18th, I'll remember that date for a long time. That was the day we had to tell our teams that we needed to shut down all of our stores. And we didn't know how long. We thought at the time, we were hoping at the time it was just going to be a couple weeks. Turned out in a lot of markets to be a couple months, unfortunately. So we had to make some pivots. The great thing for Roadrunner was that we were already very good at shipping direct to customers. So our customers still had a place to turn. And our vendors knew that was, again, that's where we started. We started out shipping product to customers. So the vendors did an amazing job of keeping Roadrunner Sports stocked with product. And that really helped to, it shifted, no question about it. People were going to stores, were now going online or calling our call center. Call it serendipity, luck, whatever you want to call it. We had an initiative just a few months before the pandemic hit where we wanted to be able to allow our phone people to work anywhere in the country where we had a store. And hiring in San Diego can be a challenge at times, especially when you look at the wage and you go other places in the country and you offer that same wage. Well, that's pretty darn good. And so we were able to allow people to work in Ohio, in Arizona, wherever the case may be, wherever we had a store. So when we had to send all of our employees home from the call center, we were actually able to shift immediately like that. All of the people in San Diego go home and start taking phone calls. In addition, we were actually able to take some of the folks who were working in stores and put them on the phone. So it was a great opportunity for them. Some of them went and worked on the phone. Some of them went to one of our warehouses. So we were able to be dynamic in that area. And I heard some of the stories out there about people trying to get in touch with companies during this pandemic, especially early days, and just never being able to get through because they didn't have people available to take phone calls. Thankfully, we didn't have that problem. We were ready to go. For the year in total, we were actually able to do a pretty darn good job of capturing that revenue. As we got ready to reopen, we said, okay, we've got to figure out now, how are we going to help our customers from a distance? Especially when we're talking about staying 6 feet away from people and going through this unique fitting experience I was telling you about and being able to mold insoles for them. So even before we shut everything down, we were already talking about, hey, if this is going to happen, we've got to figure out how do we help people from a distance. And so we went over to the store, we shot some videos, and we were ready to go. So when we reopened, we had things laid out, ready to go for our teams, and it definitely helped our teams feel comfortable and the customers feel comfortable with the process.
I can only imagine the orchestration of what you were doing at that period. What do you foresee the industry is going to experience over the next few years?
So during the pandemic, people didn't have a lot of choice other than to go outside and get moving. They did that with the family. They were hiking, they were biking. We saw national park visits skyrocket. Bicycle sales. I mean, I went out with the family and we all tried to buy bicycles. It was a little bit of a challenge to find them at times. And so I think everybody was getting outdoors. Now I think what we're seeing is a little bit of shift back. I just saw a report from Planet Fitness where they were very happy with their previous quarter results. Their memberships are bouncing back. You got Exponential Fitness in the Irvine area here in Southern California that owns several brands, including Club Pilates and Pure Barre and whatnot. They're seeing continued growth in their membership, as well as people interested in franchising with them. So I think we're seeing people go back indoors some, and people finding ways perhaps to do a little bit of both. I think the other thing we've got to pay attention to is a lot of companies are expecting their people to come back to the office. Some of it's hybrid, some of it's full-time, but that'll throw a little bit of a wrench into people's routine where, it's pretty easy. I wrap up my day, and I just go throw on my shoes and I'm going to go for a walk, go for a run, whatever the case may be. Now I've got to make that trip home, or I've got to make an intentional stop perhaps on the way home to go to a place where I can run. And I think that, people are going to have to find a way to make that happen. What I'm hoping is that they do keep moving. And I think that, there's been a lot of discussion around people wanting to stay active, that was a good result of the pandemic. Getting so many people active, understanding the importance of an active, healthy lifestyle. And so I just hope that we don't go back in the other direction and get a little bit more sedentary. And then the other thing I can't help but to think about, Tony, is sustainability. Yeah. There's certainly lots of discussion there, and you hear more and more discussion around used gear and recycling gear and things like that. And so it'll be interesting to see. I've already seen some movement in this area where some brands are reselling and allowing customers to return and do things like that, some of the gear that they've used and to resell. So Roadrunner, by the way, have been doing that for years. With their loyalty program, you could return shoes within 90 days. And if they were just a little bit dirty on the bottom, couldn't get cleaned up, didn't look brand new, Roadrunner was reselling them and continues to resell them at a little discount for the customers. And it's been a vibrant business for them for years. So I think more and more businesses may head down that path.
I love that. And I want to see that more and more. And that is something I'm seeing on my end too. Chuck, looking back, what piece of advice would you give yourself at the very beginning of your career?
I think, Tony, as I was able to grow in my career, I learned I didn't know everything. And as I learned more, I realized there's a lot more I don't know. And when I actually became comfortable with that, I was actually able to open myself up and say, your job in your career is to continue to learn and grow. And so recognizing that early on and giving myself that advice would have been beneficial. And I would also say, cut yourself a little slack. I have high expectations of myself. And I would say, be as forgiving of yourself as you are of others, that you love coaching people, you love developing them, and you give them opportunities to grow and develop. Give yourself those same opportunities to grow and develop.
These are really sage pieces of advice, Chuck. I think the first one is be a student of your craft, right? You are a student of your craft. Most people who know me know that I'm a student of executive search. I may have read almost every book that is out there on executive search because I know that if I grow with it, I just love it and I'm interested in it. I know that that's part of my own development. So that's really good advice. And also to give yourself a little bit of slack, right? Where, me personally living in Central America right now, the culture is different here, right? People do give themselves more slack. And when they see us, and they affectionately refer to us as the gringos, we're so driven and so it's got to be this, it's got to be right, it's always got to be on time. And so I think that idea of giving yourself more slack and allowing yourself to be a student and to making mistakes are okay as long as you learn from them. I think these are really good pieces of advice that hopefully for those who are listening and they're early in their career, they hear this and they can apply this. Last question for you is, tell me this, what book have you recommended the most to people that you really care about, Chuck?
It could be business related as well, but The Four Agreements is something that really hit home for me. And it's something that I've recommended to friends and family, as well as people at work. I just think that, really, and I keep it posted up here, The Four Agreements. I mean, be impeccable with your word. Don't take anything personally. Don't make assumptions. Always do your best. And I think when you think about those and you dig into what those things mean, it really gives you a little bit of that perspective that I was talking about, Tony, which is, sometimes cut yourself a little bit of slack. Do your best consistently. Your best today might not be as good as your best yesterday, and it might not be as good as your best tomorrow, but it is your best today, and that's where you got to keep focused.
Chuck, wow. That book is a book I've read more than once. And it is The Four Agreements is, and for everyone listening, I'll put this as a link in the show notes because it's that impactful of a book. Chuck, I actually tell myself I should read this book once every year or two because it's so impactful. And I love that you have it written on your wall. It's inspiring me to look around my office right now and think, is there a place I can put these? Because every day, these are really important components of being a good human being. And so on that note, really, Chuck, thank you so much for joining me today. I was really excited about our conversation, and I hope everyone who gets the opportunity to listen is also able to take some really great pieces of information that we've shared, you've shared on this. And to everyone else who's out there, I always think the best thing we can do is be kind to everyone that we engage with on a day-to-day basis. But even more importantly than that, be kind to yourselves.